Alright, y'all, I don't know why my camera keeps cutting off, but I'm gonna have to upload this chapter in sections. Alright, so please bear with me. But we're picking up where we left off, alright? So even in a relatively static society, men have never been able to construct a comprehensive, eternalized set of rules anticipating all possible legal disputes and formulating in advance the rules which would apply to them. No one can foresee all the future permutations and combinations of events, situations are bound to occur which were never contemplated when the original rules were made. How much less is such a frozen legal system possible in modern times? New instruments of production, new modes of travel and of dwelling, new credit and ownership devices, new concentrations of capital, new social customs, habits, aims, and ideals, and all these factors of innovation make vain the hope that definitive legal rules can be drafted that will forever solve all legal problems. When human relationships are transforming daily, legal relationships cannot be expressed in enduring form. And I don't know the ages of anybody who is watching this video, but I know in my lifetime I've seen many, many changes, so I can definitely attest that, yeah, it's not possible for us to create law to govern everything that is and will come. All right, the constant development of unprecedented problems requires a legal system capable of fluidity and pliancy. Our society would be straitjacketed were not the courts, with the able assistance of the lawyers, constantly overhauling the law and adapting it to the realities of ever-changing social, industrial, and political conditions. Although changes cannot be made lightly, yet rules of law must be more or less impermanent, experimental, and therefore not nicely calculable. Much of the uncertainty of law is not an unfortunate accident. It is of immense social value. Fairness of the law. Caution. Sometimes the law, because of error or misuse, does not reach a fair result. On the whole, the American legal system is one of the most comprehensive, fair, and democratic systems of law ever developed and enforced. Nevertheless, some misuses and oversights of our legal system, including abuses of discretion and mistakes by judges and juries, unequal applications of the law, and procedural mishaps, allow some guilty parties to go free. In Standifer versus United States, the U.S. Supreme Court affirmed the critical conviction of a Gulf Oil Corporation executive for aiding and abetting the bribery of an Internal Revenue Service agent. The agent has been acquitted in a separate trial. In writing the opinion of the court, Chief Justice Berger stated, "This case does no more than manifest the simple, if discomforting, reality that different juries may reach different results under any criminal statute. That is one of the consequences we accept under our jury system." Business ethics. In their personal and business lives, individuals are often faced with ethical dilemmas. Although much of the law is based on ethical standards, not all ethical standards have been enacted as law. The law establishes a minimum degree of conduct expected by persons and businesses in society. Ethics demands more. Sometimes the rule of law and the golden rule of ethics demand the same response by the person confronted with a problem. For example, federal and state laws make bribery unlawful. Thus, a person violates the law if she bribes a judge for a favorable decision in a case. Ethics would also prohibit this conduct. The law may permit something that would be ethically wrong. Consider this example. Occupational safety laws set maximum standards for emissions of dust from toxic chemicals in the workplace. Suppose a company can substantially reduce emissions below the legal standard by spending additional money. Better employee health would be the only benefit to the employer. Ethics would require the extra expenditure, the law would not. Another alternative occurs where the law demands certain conduct by a person's ethical standards are contrary. Consider this example. Federal law prohibits employers from hiring certain illegal alien workers. Suppose an employer advertises the availability of a job and receives no responses except from a person who cannot prove he is a citizen of this country or does not possess a required visa. He and his family are destitute. Should the employer hire him? The law says no, but ethics says yes. Many companies have adopted codes of ethics to be followed by their employees. The Code of Ethics is a company created list of rules to be followed by its employees, a form of ethical fundamentalism. Moral theories. How can ethics be measured? The answer is very personal. What is considered ethical by one person may not be by another. There do seem to be some universal rules about what conduct is ethical and vice versa. However, the following discussion highlights some philosophers' theories of ethics. Ethical fundamentalism. Under ethical fundamentalism, a person looks to an outside source for ethical rules or commands. This may be a book, example the Bible or Quran, or a person, example Karl Marx. Some adherents to this moral theory advocate blindly following these precepts. Critics argue that ethical fundamentalism does not permit people to determine right and wrong for themselves. Taken to an extreme, the result could be considered unethical under most other moral theories. For example, a literal interpretation of the biblical maxim, an eye for an eye, would permit retaliation. Some philosophers who support this theory argue that the precepts should be tempered by a person's own interpretation of the rules laid down by the central authority. Utilitarianism is a moral theory with its origins in the works of Jeremy Bentham, 1748 to 1832, and John Stuart Mill, 1806 to 1873. This moral theory dictates that people must choose the action or follow the rule that provides the greatest good to society. This does not mean the greatest good for the greatest number of people. For instance, if one action would increase the good of 25 people, 1 unit each, and an alternative action would increase the good of one person 26 units, the latter action should be taken. Consider this example. A company trying to determine whether it should close an unprofitable plant located in a small community. Utilitarianism would require that the benefits to shareholders from closing the plant be compared to the benefits to employees, their families, and others in the community in keeping it open. Utilitarianism has been criticized because it is difficult to estimate the good that will result from different actions. Difficult to apply in an imperfect world and treats morality as if it were impersonal mathematical calculation. Kantian ethics. Immanuel Kant, 1724 to 1804, is the best known proponent of duty ethics or deontology, from the Greek word deon meaning duty. Kant believed that people owe moral duties that are based on universal rules. For example, keeping a promise to abide by a contract is a moral duty. even if that contract turns out to be detrimental to the obligated party. This philosophy is based on the premise that a person can use reasoning to reach ethical decisions. Unlike ethical fundamentalism, it does not look to outside sources for moral rules. Kant's ethical theory believes that people should behave according to the categorical imperative: do unto others as you would have them to do unto you. In other words, put yourself in the other person's shoes, ask how you would like to be treated in the same situation, and act accordingly. For example, suppose a company is faced with the opportunity to steal a competitor's trade secret. Under Kantian ethics, the company would not do so because it would not want the other company to steal its trade secrets. The ontology's universal rules are based on two important principles. One, consistency, that is, all cases are treated alike with no exceptions. And two, reversibility, that is, the actor must abide by the rules she uses to judge the morality of someone else's conduct. A side note, I like how that uses the word or the term actor, because we all know that Mansa teaches us that we are to act. And the reason we don't have remedy is because we haven't taken action. Thus, if you are going to make an exception for yourself, then the exception becomes a universal rule that applies to all others. For example, if you rationalize that it is all right for you to engage in deceptive trade practices, then it's all right for competitors to also do so. Kantian ethics has been criticized for its formalism. For example, if the universal rule does not permit lying, an employee cannot praise his boss's presentation to avoid being fired. Another criticism of Kantian ethics is that it is hard to reach a consensus as to what the universal rules should be. Next, we have Rawls' social justice theory. John Locke, 1632 to 1704, and Jean-Jacques Rousseau, 1712 to 1778, proposed a social contract theory of morality. Under this theory, each person is presumed to have entered into a social contract with all others in society to obey moral rules that are necessary for people to live in peace and harmony. This implied contract states, I will keep the rules if everyone else does. These moral rules are then used to solve conflicting interests in society. Today, the leading proponents of the social justice theory are John Rawls, a contemporary philosopher at Harvard University. Under Rawls' distributive justice theory, fairness is considered the essence of justice. The principles of justice should be those chosen by persons who do not yet know their station in society. Thus, their veil of ignorance would permit the fairest possible principles to be selected. For instance, the principle of equal opportunity would be promulgated by people who would not yet know if they were in a favored class. Rawls proposes that such justice be delivered through society's institutions, the government, educational institutions, and the marketplace. As a caveat, Rawls also proposes that the least advantaged in society must receive special assistance to allow them to realize their potential. As a caveat, Rawls also proposes that the least advantaged in society must receive special assistance to allow them to realize their potential. Mm. Thank God that we have social media, because there are a lot of people that are providing special assistance to us so that we may all interpret the acts and the laws as they were written, which is for our benefit and not for our disadvantage. Rawls' theory of distributive justice is criticized for two reasons. First, establishing the blind original position for choosing moral principles is impossible in the real world. Second, many persons in society would choose not to maximize the benefit to the least advantaged persons in society. We've already seen that taking place. All right, ethical relativism. Ethical relativism posits, which means assumes as a fact, that individuals must decide what is ethical based on their own feelings as to what is right or wrong. Under this moral theory, if a person meets his own moral standard in making a decision, no one can criticize him for it. Thus, there are no universal ethical rules to guide a person's conduct. This theory has been criticized because action that is usually thought to be unethical, example, committing fraud, would not be unethical if the perpetrator thought it was in fact ethical. Few philosophers advocate ethical relativism as an acceptable moral theory. The preceding theories are some of the most important for evaluating ethical behavior. These theories can be applied in addressing both personal and business ethics. All right, go back to a little insert they have titled International Law, Ethical Issues in International Business, Downing an Aircraft Manufacturer. Universal ethical rules may exist within a country, but they definitely do not exist for the world as a whole. This is because the cultures and laws of countries are different. Thus, what may be unethical in one country may be considered ethical in another. A corporation that operates in many countries, a transnational company, is faced with a dilemma. Does it follow the ethical rule of its parent country or its host country? The Lockheed Corporation, a Fortune 500 company that manufactures aircraft, faced this problem.